post-Impressionist movement was in part a reaction against Impressionism by artists after the mid-1880s. The work of the post-Impressionists reflects more interest in the structure and form of composition, more profound meaning in their subject, and a willingness to distort, alter, or abstract reality to achieve these ends. The 5 artists we will be studying, Cézanne, Seurat, Van Gogh, Toulouse-Lautrec, and Gauguin, modified Impressionism's characteristics to such an extent that the art of the future, Expressionism, Cubism, abstract, and non-objective art can be traced back to their revisions. Paul Cézanne's paintings were among the earliest examples of post-Impressionism. He built more geometrically structured compositions and was more interested in capturing the sensation of light in his art based on his observation of nature rather than the light-filled atmosphere found in Impressionism. This painting of 1880 is called Houses in Provence. Georges Seurat attempted to build out of Impressionism art that was more stable and carefully planned, and he developed a style called pointillism, which was the placement of small strokes or dots of colors on a painting so that from a distance they blended together. This work of 1886 is called A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. Vincent van Gogh developed his own personal style as a product of Impressionism. He used the thickness, the shape, and the direction of his brush strokes to create a tactile complement to his intense color schemes. This is Van Gogh's The Night Café, painted in 1888. Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec evolved a vibrant style that captured the movements and expressions of popular entertainers and their audience. He used the oblique view technique of Degas, whom he admired, but placed more emphasis on linear outline and human characterization. This gouache on cardboard painting of 1892 is called Quadrille at the Moulin Rouge. Paul Gauguin favored an expression of subjective feelings. He felt that the Impressionists were held back by their realism and neglected the mysterious centers of thought. His art is decorative and his subjects have an aspect of fantasy. This painting of 1891 was entitled Ia Orana Maria. Now that we have given you an overview of the artists in this program, we will now study each one's work more comprehensively. This is Cézanne's Bay of Marseille, seen from L'Estaque. Its composition has broad horizontal planes which include the buildings on the shore, the water, the bay, the mountains, and the sky. These are set one above the other as large shapes on the surface of his canvas. This detail shows Cézanne's interest in structure and his composition based on a series of contrasts between vertical and horizontal planes. Contrasting sharply with Cézanne's work just seen is Monet's impressionistic The Beach at Saint-Adresse, which is less geometrically structured. In this landscape, the turning road at Roche-Guyon, Cézanne's distortions tend to diminish a sense of space and give the effect of the painting being an artificial construction of reality. You can see the way he has changed the angle of the road so that it's not a receding diagonal, and he's raised the level of the mountains, making a higher horizon line so that the forms build up on the surface rather than recede. You can see Cézanne's structured style in Still Life with Peppermint Bottle, painted in 1894. The purposeful distortion of the forms is a unique characteristic of Cézanne's style and was very different from traditional still lifes. This still life by Willem Kelf, painted in 1665, appeals to the senses and the appetite. It has a realistic sense of texture and form, much different from Cézanne's flattened surfaces. This split frame showing details of Cézanne's still life on the left and Kelf's on the right clearly illustrates the contrast between the two styles. This painting, The Basket of Apples, shows quite prominently Cézanne's use of shifting levels of perspective. Some objects are viewed from above, some from below, and some head-on. Cézanne used this technique because of the abstract design he was able to create. Cézanne painted still life with plaster Cupid in 1892. This later work showed more exaggerated distortions. Cézanne sets up particularly complex relationships with real apples and onions, a plaster copy of a real statue, a painting of another plaster copy, and a floor that seems to tilt up precariously. One can see a further light quality in Cézanne's later still lifes, as here in Still Life with Apples and Peaches, painted in 1905. There is a profusion of objects and colors within the composition. Cézanne's late landscapes, such as this one, Le Château Noir, painted between 1900 and 1904, show less concentration on geometric structure. There's more of a sense of complexity, of density, and crowding. House on a Hill, another of Cézanne's later works, reveals the larger, more impassioned brushstrokes he used during this period. Line plays less of a role. There is an increasing abstraction and a simplification of the structure. This is complemented by the freedom of the brushstroke, which seems in these paintings to be an abstract patchwork on the surface. The painting you see here is the most important of Georges Seurat's pointillistic style, A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jatte. He conceived of each dot as a unit of information for viewing the data of light and color interaction. Although this is a parallel to Impressionism in the use of the divided stroke, Seurat wanted to give a scientific certainty to the procedure by combining a certain number of dots in a certain area to give certain effects. Seurat spent 2 years making preparatory studies for A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jatte. The result is an overwhelming sense of order and control in his composition. He took the Impressionist theme of an informal outing and the Impressionist analysis of light and transformed them into a painting that seems rigid and remote. This study of a woman with a monkey for A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jatte typifies the feeling in the painting that the figures seem frozen in action. Actually, his intent was to give his painting of modern Parisian workers the dignity and the grandeur of the classical figures depicted in ancient Grecian sculpture. In the Impressionist painting of 1881, The Luncheon of the Boating Party by Renoir, you can see the spontaneity and informality characteristic of that style. It is in sharp contrast to Seurat's work. A detail of The Luncheon of the Boating Party is shown on the left. On the right is a detail of Seurat's A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of Le Grand Jatte. The pointillist technique is also clearly evident in this painting by Seurat, Seascape at Port-au-Basson, Normandy. Invitation to the Sideshow shows further the abstract quality of Seurat. The rigid figures in a composition arranged in rigid horizontals and verticals give the painting the stillness of a strange religious rite. In this detail, you can see Seurat's concern with the emotional associations with certain colors. He felt that calmness could be achieved not only by horizontal lines, but by a balance of warm and cool colors and light and dark values. Seurat also used the pointillist technique and the idea of emotional associations of colors in his landscapes. In The Bridge at Courbevoie, painted in 1886-87, Seurat achieves a poetic melancholy effect by the predominance of blue and purple tones. Lighthouse at Honfleur again is typical of Seurat's style. He, along with Cézanne, represent the side of post-impressionism which searched for structure and permanence and order. Now we will look at another branch of post-impressionism. This is a self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh, painted in 1889. He was an artist who exploited the pictorial and abstract elements of line, color, form, and even brushstrokes to express very personal emotions. He was a troubled man who seemed to have a need to confront himself, which is reflected in his many self-portraits. This is Self-Portrait at 35 by Renoir. In this impressionist painting, there is no probing below the surface. The face is passive, without traces of great strain or anguish. This split frame shows clearly the contrast in styles and emotions. In Van Gogh's self-portrait on the left, the sharp, painful delineation of the face contrasts with the swirling turmoil of the background. In Renoir's calm, untroubled self-portrait, we can see his face subjected to the same play of light and color that one might find in an impressionist landscape painting. In The Night Café, painted in 1888, Van Gogh uses color to create an emotional, almost uncomfortable feeling. The different kinds of brushstrokes emphasize the unearthly glare of the gas lights, and his exaggeration of the perspective reflects alienation and isolation. Again, we see a great contrast in this impressionist painting by Renoir, Dancing at the Moulin de la Galette, which displays an agreeable, light-hearted cafe scene. The Bedroom at Arles, also painted in 1888, is another painting that shows the typical qualities of Van Gogh's style as it developed in Arles: the brighter, more intense colors, the use of different sorts of brushstrokes, and particularly the exaggerated perspective. Red flowers stand out against the yellow greens of the field in Farmhouse in Provence, Arles. Van Gogh's brushwork is heavy, the forms are outlined, and each area has a distinct, dominant color. Monet's poppy field near Giverny, with blurred, merging areas and its lack of sharp contours, illustrates again the difference in impressionistic style and post-impressionistic style. The Olive Orchard of 1889 was painted with less intense colors, but the forms are heavily outlined, a treatment often used by Van Gogh. The brushstrokes make the forms of this landscape seem to writhe and twist in an anguish that must have reflected Van Gogh's own precarious emotional state. In La Mousme, Van Gogh used the complementary colors of blue and orange to paint the dress. These colors, placed side by side, intensify one another, creating excitement and activating the painting. Van Gogh's emotional state at this time was somewhat more calm and untroubled. However, he became more alienated and isolated. Girl in White was painted in 1890, shortly before he took his own life. Notice the thickly pigmented brushstrokes, the outlined form, and the sad, pathetic face painted in a sickly green. The cafes and dance halls of Montmartre provided Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec with inspiration for many of his paintings. Such places were frequented by the fringes of society and outcasts, like Lautrec himself, who was crippled and dwarfed. Lautrec tended to stylize or caricaturize his subjects and used pronounced contrasts of color. This gouache painting of 1892 is called Quadrille at the Moulin Rouge. Here is a similar scene at another dance hall. In his art, Lautrec often searched out the unpleasant or cruel in modern life, focusing on human loneliness and suffering. Notice the averted gazes of the subjects and their perceptive characterization by Lautrec. Also, Lautrec's choice of color contributes to the overall dreary mood. Lautrec painted himself in company with his friends in this painting at the Moulin Rouge, his favorite dance hall. Notice that Lautrec uses an oblique angle in his composition and crops figures at the edge of the painting, a style similar to that of Degas, whom he admired. Lautrec used the decorative flatness of Japanese prints in his lithographs. May Milton is a lithograph of one of the performers at the Moulin Rouge. The Japanese influence also led him to produce expressive abstractions of the figure for which he became best known. His simple characterization is very evident in this painting, Jane Avril. She was a star performer who danced at the Moulin Rouge, and Lautrec dedicated many of his works to her. Here, in Maxime de Thomas, a gouache painted in 1896, Lautrec's journalistic eye captures the isolation of the spectator and the character of the women of the dance hall. Paul Gauguin, like Van Gogh, isolated himself from society. He left his business and family in Paris to seriously devote his life to painting. He had exhibited with the Impressionists and was greatly influenced by Camille Pissarro. This impressionistic influence is seen in Brittany Landscape, painted in 1888. Gauguin's Britain Girls Dancing, Pont-Aven, was also painted in 1888. The impressionistic style of the divided brushstroke can be seen in the field and background. However, the figures begin to reflect the strong pattern and flat planes associated with Gauguin's later work. Because Gauguin rejected modern society, he was attracted to Brittany. It was a primitive, rural region of France with a naive religious piety taking the place of urban sophistication. His self-portrait shows a lesser commitment to realism than Van Gogh had. Gauguin used more abstract, flat linear forms. The symbolic background of the apple of temptation, a halo, a serpent in his hand, and a diabolical expression on his face portrayed his own uncertainty about himself as a complex person caught between good and evil. By the Sea was painted during Gauguin's first visit to Tahiti in 1891, which took him even further from the sophistication of modern urban civilization. The painting's theme is life by the seaside, but it is not a realistic representation. The two-dimensional painting is highly decorative and is built up of rhythmic shapes, uniting the foreground to the tree trunk and the waves. The two-dimensional quality is very evident in this detail, which shows a figure and the botanical shapes of flowers and a tree trunk. The Day of the God by Gauguin suggests a native feast or ritual with its symmetrical composition and balancing elements. The poses and gestures seem to have some kind of ritual significance. It is characteristic of symbolic art, which focuses on the suggestive and mysterious. Gauguin was concerned with the mystical and exotic element of life, and his curving, flowing, abstracted forms and shapes reflected this concern. He wanted to give that sense of the mystery he felt was just beyond the surface of things in life. This is evident in the bathers. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Is considered by many to be Gauguin's masterpiece. It appears to be a personal interpretation of traditional, spiritual, and philosophic beliefs about man's existence through the imagery of the Polynesian natives he admired. Unlike the Impressionists who treated the surface appearances of contemporary life, Gauguin used exotic subjects to portray life's underlying meanings, as seen in this detail. The oversized composition was painted on rough textured sackcloth with intense exotic colors. This detail illustrates Gauguin's skillful use of design to create the elements that compose this masterful painting. The lush vegetation of Tahiti and the natural, simple native women are often decorative motifs Gauguin places in his imaginative paintings. This is Ia Orana Maria. In this program, you have seen the work of some of the most prominent post-impressionists. They, along with others of their time, laid the groundwork for even more radical art developments that were to happen in the early 20th century.